Welcome to the Lebra Podcast, where education leaders explore the intersection of culture, strategy, and innovation in today's schools. I'm your host, Nate Lichte, and in each episode, we'll uncover the leadership habits, systems, and bold ideas that help districts thrive. Trent, thanks so much for sitting down with me today and just sharing a little bit about your background in the district. Maybe for folks kind of listening, would you mind telling us a little bit about your journey? How did you get into education? What led you to the superintendency? And we'll start there.
Sure. So as far as how I got into education, I actually started as a pre-dentistry major at IUPUI in Indianapolis. I went there to play some basketball, and I'd always been interested in the health professions. But after about a semester, I just was not enjoying my classes and really had to do some soul searching and think about, what do I want to do? I had a really good experience in education growing up. My elementary clear up through high school, I enjoyed my experience in my hometown, and I felt like I had a lot to offer when it came to education. I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed letting my knowledge be known. So I'm like, I think I want to be a teacher. So switched my major, got into education, spent 7 years in the classroom, but I knew going into education that I probably was not going to be a lifelong teacher. I always enjoyed leadership. I thought, administration was definitely a good route for me. So started working on my master's, getting my principal's license about 4 years into teaching. Got that done in 3 years, took a couple classes during the school year, took several classes over the summer. So I spent 7 years in the classroom and then got my first administration job. I was the assistant principal of a middle school. And then actually had the ability to go back to my hometown and be an administrator there for 12 years.
Wow.
Decided that I thought I wanted to go the central office route, whether that was assistant superintendent or superintendent. So went back and got my EDS and superintendent's license, and ended up moving my family south to southern Indiana to take a central office job with North Lawrence Schools in Bedford. And then shortly after that, was there about a year and a half, and a superintendency came open in a neighboring district, Eastern Green, and decided to jump at that chance and became a superintendent, and did that for 5 years before I moved here to Monroe-Gregg for the past year and a half so far. So that's kind of been my journey through education and why I got into it.
Wow, that's awesome. So tell me a little bit about your current district, about the community and some of those things, just for folks that may not know of Monroe.
Yeah, so the first thing I will say about this community and what I learned early on, even when I was doing research of whether I was even going to apply for this job, very tight-knit community who loves their schools. There's no better way to put it than that. And that's what I found out when I was even doing my research for applying for this job, because that's where I want to be. I want to be at a place where people are behind their teachers, they're behind their administrators, they love the schools, they want to help. So that's about the best way I could put it, is very tight-knit community that loves their schools. We're a smaller district. However, we have about 1,513 kids, I believe was our count day total. And we hover around there between there and 1,550 right now. So we're smaller, but yet we're so close to Indy that we kind of unfortunately compete with some bigger schools for teachers and resources and things like that. Because we're only, we can, from my office, I can be to downtown Indy in like 25 minutes.
Oh, wow.
But yet we're in a rural setting. We're starting to see some growth as far as, people in Marion County want to kind of not necessarily always live in Marion County. So we're seeing some growth out towards us. And I think it's inevitable that that's going to happen. So yeah, we're kind of in this weird place of we're rural right now, but we're seeing some of that urban sprawl head our way. So that's kind of a little bit about our district and what we deal with.
Yeah, I've heard that from a number of folks that we've talked about, that they're in that sort of proximity to a larger rural area, and it's playing some impacts. Can you talk about a little bit about, in terms of competing for staff and how it's impacting student populations? How are you working through all of those challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, it can be tough. Like for example, competing for teachers and even classified staff like custodians and aides and things like that. For example, Brownsburg schools, Plainfield schools, Avon, all within like 20, 30 minutes of us, but they're much bigger districts, and their starting pay for a teacher might be lower 50,000s or maybe closer to 55, and we're right now paying 45.
Wow.
We have to deal with, well, I can go 20 minutes down the road and make 10,000 more, and I can't compete with that. Not without affecting my budget greatly.
Yeah.
So that's hard. And even custodial will be like, well, I can go over here and make a couple dollars more an hour. And I get that. I want people to be happy and be able to do what they need to do for their family. So there's no hard feelings there. But I think what helps us, and we have had the ability to stay fully staffed for the most part. There's a lot of people that still want to be part of a community like this that is very close knit, smaller. They get to know more people. So I think there is a draw to some of these smaller schools like ours that people want to be at because of that small town feel. So that helps us some.
Yeah. Yeah. That community feel for a number of folks, not only in terms of just the benefits that it plays on the district and the community, but from a staff retention and attraction standpoint. Like, I've seen, and we've talked with a number of districts that are similar size to you, where they are actually heavily using that as their strategic advantage to how they're targeting those roles. Which leads me to kind of my next question is when you think about the district's future and the vision, can you talk to me about what that vision? I mean, you've been in the district a year and a half now. What's kind of the vision for the district as a whole?
Yeah, well, it's your timing's perfect because we're actually going to start working on a strategic plan here very quickly, probably in the second semester. As far as the vision goes, through the ROI process, the Rural Opportunity Initiative, we did create kind of a vision and mission. I don't have that right in front of me to kind of quote from it, but really a lot of it is about what we want to see out of our students when they graduate, that
Yep.
profile of a graduate. So that plays into it a lot. How we want to get the community involved in that. How do we involve the community in making sure our kids are ready when they leave Monrovia schools? Making sure we have the staff that we need, and we're giving the staff the tools that they need to create those graduates. It's kind of
Yeah.
a threefold process there of what are we doing as a school to prepare the kids? How are we relying on the community to help us with that? And how are we preparing the staff to get all of that done?
Yeah, that's a huge piece of it. So another thing I wanted to kind of talk with you about is, we know, and we've heard this from a number of districts, especially in similar size districts, like there's challenges and opportunities as it relates to budget right now, and financial stewardship in a leadership role is probably not. It's one of the most critical things that I think many district leaders across the countries are facing with. Can you share with us a little bit about your approaches to that, and how you're kind of navigating those opportunities today?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. There's not a day that goes by, whether I'm sitting in my chair right here in my office or I'm sitting at home, that I am not thinking about the budget. It's the most important and also the most difficult thing a superintendent's dealing with right now. I would say if you polled 100 superintendents, they every single one of them would say, I worry about the budget daily. Our approach has had to, we've had to be very conservative. We've already made some cuts, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but we had to be 100% proactive. So we made some very difficult budget cut decisions going into this current school year. This past summer, we had to make some cuts. I am very open with our staff that I've told them every single position that comes open through either a retirement, a resignation, we are going to evaluate whether it needs to be filled. If we feel like it does not need to be filled, we're not going to, and we're going to save that money. And that is from a certified, classified, doesn't matter. Whatever position it is, we're going to evaluate whether it needs to be filled or not. We're trying to be creative and looking in ways we can do things a little bit differently. Like we currently have a request for proposals out there from companies that can provide maintenance and custodial services. So we might look at outsourcing that while still hopefully keeping the people that we have. We've got, one of the things I made clear to my custodial staff was that I'm not going to do this unless companies will come in and hire you. I'm not going to just get rid of you to save a buck. So yeah, we're just trying to be creative in that way. But like I said, we have the very difficult job of looking at things and seeing whether we are able to keep everything we currently have.
Well, and that's just the unfortunate situation for many districts, especially like I said, in your size, and even larger districts are experiencing similar challenges. They're just shaped differently. But it adds another layer. Like you started this with, one of the attractions about this district is the unique community. And for a community like yours that's heavily involved in the district, and there's that amazing kind of kinship between the two of them, when you have to go through difficult challenges of change with budgets, it's like you're doing now. It means you have to lead differently. You have to lead with like transparency, and you have to, all these different things. It makes these decisions even harder as the head of the district. Is there anything that you did that you felt really helped to kind of navigate the challenge, whether it be transparency with the community and how you approach it, or anything that other districts may be able to kind of look at to kind of help as they may be facing similar challenges?
Yeah, I think the first thing you said is key, which is transparency. I think you just have to put out as much information as possible about what you are doing and planning on doing. You've got to get your message out first. If you don't get your message out first, somebody else is going to get it out for you. They'll be talking about it. So if you can get your message out about, here's the unfortunate decision we had to make to cut X, Y, and Z positions, and here's why. If you can get that out there, that will give people that hopefully the information that they need. I mean, there's still going to be talks about it and chatter about it, and maybe even some misinformation, but you can hopefully, take care of that if you're transparent enough. And some other things that I'm doing, I've started putting out a bi-weekly newsletter to staff. Hopefully going to start getting that out even to the community. We have ways to get that out through, like, we use Parent Square to get messages out to parents. I could put it out through that. And that contains a lot of information about finances, curriculum, just district highlights, things like that. Board meetings. When I have board meetings, I try to just give everybody the information that they need. I talk openly about how much stuff costs. It's not just, hey, I want to contract with this person. Board, would you give me permission to contract? I tell the public, okay, it's going to cost us $5,000 to do that. So that they know that I'm being open. We talk about when the board approves claims, I talk publicly about, well, here's 5 or 6 claims that you don't normally see in a month, and here's what the money was spent on, especially if it's a decent amount of money. So I think just being very transparent and just getting the public as much information as you can. Also educating them on just school finances in general. People don't understand that. I mean, it's hard for a superintendent to sometimes grasp how school funding works. I mean, I remember going into my first superintendency, and I took a finance class for my EDS, but it didn't teach you everything you needed to know, not even close. So it took me until I did about my 3rd budget. That's when I started feeling a little bit more comfortable with understanding how school finance works. So you have to educate the public on how it works. Some of them don't understand that you can't spend money out of the operations fund for certain things, but you can out of the education fund, because they're like, well, you're putting a new roof on the school, pay the teachers that money. Well, I can't, because it comes out of operations. So, I think transparency and educating the public are 2 just major things you have to try to do.
Yeah, that's a huge piece. And something you mentioned earlier when you were speaking was just kind of addressing the misinformation. And that education piece is so much of that, because it's just, there is, school budgets, there's so many nuances to it, and a lot of folks don't know how the spending is and the decisions are being made.
If I can add one other thing too, that I think is important, we're going to start in the second semester. We're going to start what's called a family forum. We advertised to the community that we wanted to try to bring in families that have kids in our school. And one thing we want to see come out of this is we want their input on that profile of a graduate. Once again, what do you want to see for your kids when they leave Monrovia schools? How are they prepared? What skills we need to give them, that sort of thing. But we're also going to use that as an opportunity to educate them on those things I just talked about. And then one thing we want to ask them is, when you do leave here with the information you have about how schools run and the budget and all that stuff, if you could be, a mouthpiece for us, like when you do hear misinformation, help squash that. Say, no, I was part of this family forum and here's exactly how this goes and that sort of thing. So, and we hope to do that yearly. So we're building this bigger pocket of informed community members that are going to be able to inform other community members of how things really work and help get rid of that misinformation. So that's another thing we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Well, and that's such a huge piece, right? Like for your community, when you address the misinformation, you bring them in for that collaborative for the profile of a graduate, but then it becomes this mobilizing technique to kind of partner with the community. Mm-hmm. And that's what I appreciate so much about rural and suburban districts is a lot of times they're doing some really creative partnerships. So can you talk to me a little bit about, like you all have a unique partnership with Hendricks Regional Healthcare and a couple of community partners. Can you tell us a little bit about how that expanded significantly and just how did you pursue that approach?
Yeah, so with Hendricks, the partnership there started out with just our athletic trainer. They were providing us an athletic trainer, and obviously we pay some funds into that, but not as much as we would be if we had to hire our own. So it started there, and then we started approaching the idea of could we use them for school nursing? Because we know there was some schools around us that use them for that. So we just brought them in and had them come up with a proposal for us, and it was definitely going to help us out. Ended up using them for that. So now they provide our school nurses, and which comes with all kinds of benefits because they can provide certain trainings for us that maybe we didn't have before, and even some resources. They have the ability to probably get better pricing for us on nursing supplies that we need and things like that. So that's definitely been a blessing and probably even some cost savings for us. So that's been a huge. Another partnership that we have is with Adult and Child Rehabilitation Services, and that's actually done through the Kendrick Foundation here in Morgan County. Kendrick Foundation is a foundation that helps with kind of philanthropic opportunities, and so the Kendrick Foundation helps provide mental health services for the county schools. So Adult and Child will be able to see some of our students who are on Medicaid, and they can come into our schools and provide therapy and counseling services and things like that. And that's been a huge partnership for us there. We do have it's not really a partnership. It's more of kind of what we provide here, but we have a food pantry that is out of our school called Bulldog Blessings. But out of that is a partnership with, I can't remember who they use for, maybe Food Finders. So that's a partnership that we have where we're able to get some food in here and then hand it out to some of the parents and families of our community that are in need. So those are just some of the partnerships we've been able to create that have been a big blessing to our community.
Mm-hmm. So how do you, when you think about community partnerships like this, and you're doing a number of different things, how do you decide which partnerships align and which ones to kind of lean in and pursue? And, is it something that just in like your community has just kind of come about, or is it something that you've really started to approach with a high degree of intentionality?
Well, I would say for example, like the Hendricks partnership, that definitely grew out of a couple things. Number one is budget. We looked at, is this a way we could save some funding? But another thing was just maybe having a little bit more solid pipeline to nurses, because we were having a little bit of turnover. So I'd say that one grew out of necessity a little bit. I think when you look at partnerships and which ones to pursue, I think it comes down to the culture of your community, and really also why I'm going to enjoy having a strategic plan done here, hopefully in the second semester, is it all has to flow back to that strategic plan. Is a partnership you're pursuing going to flow out of that plan? If it doesn't, then I don't think it's one you need to be pursuing.
Yeah.
If it is if you can go to that strategic plan and say, yeah, that partnership definitely would fit this part of our strategic plan, then go for it. But if not, I think that's one you need to kind of let go. So yeah, I think it needs to flow out strategic plan, but also kind of what the culture of your community and in your school building is. You'll know if it feels right.
Yeah. I think that's such a huge piece is alignment, and then attachment to, like you just mentioned, community and culture, and how that's kind of going through. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the education initiatives that you've got going on, because you've got the Monroe-Gregg School of Integrated Technology. I know there's, I think even Project Lead the Way, which specifically begins in elementary school. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the education initiatives that you kind of are working on in the district?
So you mentioned MIT. That is our kind of a twofold thing going on there. That's our alternative education program. So as we know, not every kid performs best in a traditional brick and mortar setting in a regular classroom. So we do have some students that I think we've got about 16 or 17 kids in that program. And it's typically a half day program. They either come in the morning or the afternoon. Really, it's helped save some of our kids. We have some kids that absolutely probably would not graduate if it weren't for this program. So that's been a great initiative that they've had for several years there. You mentioned Project Lead the Way. We are doing some stuff with that goes down into elementary. We've had some teachers K through 12 that have agreed to get trained in that, and they're able to teach some lessons with Project Lead the Way. We have here at the high school, middle school setting, some kind of laser engravers that kids can program projects into and create all kinds of things. Like, for example, let me grab this. I can show you. They created
coasters. Cool.
Yeah, so they can do things like that. They created there's a binder that I have that just has just writing paper in it, and they engraved on the outside of that, just had that bulldog on there, and it said, Monroe-Gregg School District and things like that. So yeah, they're doing some neat things with laser engraving. We started an online school this year. Right now, we don't have a whole lot of kids in it. I think there's only 5-6 kids in it, but I think it'll probably grow. So that's another initiative we started there. We are continuing to look to create more dual credit courses. We did add some more dual credit for this year. We have plans to try to add some more for the following years if we can. We always look to, are there any other AP courses? Even though we're pretty strong with AP right now, probably more so than dual credit. So we're trying to even that out a little bit with some more dual credit. I think that's the bulk of what we're working on right now.
I mean, it's quite a bit.
Yeah, it keeps me busy.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
some others help me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you think about like these programs that you have going from an education and academic perspective, like, a huge piece of this is outcomes, and some of it is trying some different things, figuring out what's working and what's worth expanding, and kind of this effectiveness piece. How do you all, how are you looking at all of that with all of these kind of programs and things, not just from an academic perspective, but just in general?
I think you just have to, when you get these programs started, I think, the term you used was outcomes. When you get these started, you have to just consistently evaluate them. Is it meeting the goals that we set for it? And once again, we're going to go to our strategic plan. Once we have that done, is it meeting what our strategic plan wants us to get accomplished? So that's going to be the first thing we look at. But then, there's other goals that we obviously try to set for these programs. Is it hitting those goals? Is it truly the outcomes we want for our kids? You have to look at that too. So I think, if you can look back and say that it's meeting our strategic plan, it's hitting the goals that we've set, is it the outcomes we actually want for our kids? Then it's a program that if you answer yes to those, then it's a program we keep going. If not, we either have to make that program better, or is it a program that we should really be focusing on if it's not hitting all of those things?
Absolutely. So you mentioned earlier at the very beginning of our discussion that, you kind of got into the superintendency because you had sort of this interest in leadership and you'd been exploring some of that before. Talk to us a little bit about how that influences you now that you've been in this leadership role for a while, led a couple of districts, been in administration for some time. Talk to me a little bit about your leadership style and just how you've been kind of growing and refining that and how it impacts you today.
So as far as my leadership style goes, I've always felt like I was a servant leader. I didn't ever want anybody to have to do anything that I wasn't willing to do. So, for example, when I was the principal of an elementary building, I made sure I was in school lunches for part of at least every day that I was in the building. I might not be in there for the entire lunch time from K through 5. There were days I was. But I would try to get in there for at least some point of every day, but not just to be in there and be visible, but I would clean tables. I'd wash the tables off. I would clean up spills. I would, sweep up and that sort of thing. So I wanted people to be able to see that, I'm the leader of the building, but I'm willing to jump in and help wherever. I went out and helped with recess duty and that sort of thing. So same thing for the superintendency. While, I might not be in a school lunch every day, you at least still try to be visible and that sort of thing. But I think you can serve in a different way as a superintendent too. For example, I try to make sure my administrators know that I'm not going to micromanage your building. I'm going to let you accomplish your goals that you personally have that also are going to fit our strategic plan and that sort of thing. I'm going to let you make some decisions that you need to make. Make sure you inform me of those types of things. But I'm not going to, micromanage you and that sort of thing. So, and that's what I always appreciated as when I was at the building level, is appreciated the superintendent that, let me make some decisions that I need to make about my building. And as long as I kept them informed, they were good with that. So I learned a lot from some others. I also learned from some that, unfortunately, who did micromanage me. I learned why I didn't like that and why I didn't want to be that type of person. So you got to learn from both. You learn from the good and you learn from the ones that aren't as good. So yeah, I guess my leadership style is just I try to be a servant, but at the same time give people the autonomy they need to get the job done. I think as a superintendent, you have to surround yourself with people who have skills that you don't.
Yeah.
I have never been intimidated by someone who is smarter than me, thinks more creatively than I do. It's like, you have to have those people on your team. And if you're intimidated by that, you're probably in the wrong profession. Unfortunately, I've been around some people who they did not want anybody on their team that was smarter than them or more creative than them. And they, in my opinion, suffered for that. So yeah, that's just kind of what I try to do as a superintendent.
And I think a huge piece of leadership specifically is exhibiting courageous leadership, right? Like, especially as a district, like, earlier we discussed some of the budgeting challenges and the impacts of that on the community. And there's a piece of this that to exhibit courageous leadership, there's staying, it's important to stay steady in times of criticism. Talk to us a little bit about about that, because some of the things that have been out there and how you've addressed this and getting in front of it. Like you have firsthand experience in that, and other district leaders are going to experience similar things. So talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I found out very quickly. So in my first superintendency, I took over Eastern Green District in November of 2019. And then by spring break of 20, so just, 4 or 5 months, we were shut down for COVID. And then started the next school year, 2021, with, mask mandates and you name it. So I cut my teeth very quickly on very angry people, parents, angry staff of what was going on. And it was hard at first. I'd never really had that before. I mean, I had people angry at me, but not on that scale. So here's the first thing I would say as far as criticism. It's part of your job as a superintendent. It is at your doorstep all the time. There's never anybody who is always happy, whether it's staff, community, you name it. It's something you're going to have to just accept and deal with. It takes time sometimes to get better at that. I am now at a place where it's much easier for me. Some of it comes down to faith. I'll just be very honest. If you're a person of faith, that helps quite a bit, in my opinion. But I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that there is not an ounce of worry that I will go through that is going to make a whole lot of difference on how people view me or whether they think I'm doing a good job. So I could sit around and worry about that all the time. And there's times I have. I mean, sitting in my recliner at home, and I've been sitting there like worrying about, did I do this right? Did I do that right? And then at the end of the day, I think, did all that worry and stress I put myself through really matter to anybody else other than me? Yeah. No, it didn't. So I'm at a place now where I judge myself based off of, did I put the thought I needed to into that decision? Did I put the work necessary into that decision? And if I can say yes to those two, and I can say yes to, was it the right decision for kids first, and then staff, and then community on down the road? If I can say yes to those things, I feel like I've done the right thing. All these people who have an opinion on it are going to say about it, because you're going to be right to some, you're going to be wrong to others. It doesn't matter what decision you make. It's the way it's going to go. You can't sit there and lose a ton of sleep over it, or you'll be a ball of stress. And there was a point in my life that's where I was, and it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my family. So you just got to resign yourself to the fact that you've got to make decisions, and you've got to be at peace with it if it's the right decision.
Yeah, that measure and the things, kind of that checklist that you were doing to kind of validate. I think that's so important. And it's easy for, I think, leaders in districts to kind of sometimes lose sight of that. If you're doing what's right by kids, by the staff, by the community, at the end of the night, that we have to, sometimes that has to be enough. And knowing, I think too, like you said, criticism's always there. And that's part of the job, part of the gig. The last thing I want to ask about, because it's so important as from a leadership perspective, is how do you ensure, and especially as we talked about, where at the beginning you shared with your proximity to other districts, staff retention and sourcing and attraction and things is a huge piece. How do you ensure that staff feel seen and valued and supported in the district? That ultimately also falls on you as the head of the district. Are you all doing anything kind of unique there to kind of steward that sort of that culture?
I wouldn't say we're doing anything super unique that I haven't seen other districts do, but I can talk about a few things we are doing. So I try to at least once a quarter have what we just kind of call them coffee talks, even though we don't really provide coffee, but you can bring your own coffee. So I try to get out into the buildings once a quarter and have discussions with with the staff. I typically try to bring some topics that I want to talk to them about for information I feel they need. Sometimes it's usually finance type stuff, but there's always possibly some other things. And then I always try to say, hey, bring some topics you want to bring, and I'll try to talk to it and that sort of thing. We still do monthly discussion with the teachers union here. I know some districts maybe don't do it every month, maybe every other month. I haven't really heard of any schools or districts that have completely gone away from discussion, even though we can. It's not mandated we do it anymore. But I was never of the opinion that less communication was better. Right. So when I was first approached about, are you still going to do monthly discussion with the teachers union. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it would not behoove me to sit here and be like, no, I'm not going to talk to any of you. So we still do monthly discussion. They're allowed, they give me some topics they want to talk about. Very rarely do I tell them like, oh, I'm going to take that off the agenda for this month. I think there's been a couple times where I'm like, can you maybe reach out and talk to that person personally? I don't know that I want to talk about that in a bigger forum, but for the most part,
Yeah.
they bring me good topics that we can talk about in a bigger forum. So we do that also. But I've also made it very clear to staff, like, now I do believe in the chain of command. And I really ask people to follow that chain of command, and they know that if they have concerns, go to that next rung up the chain of command. If that's your administrator, go to them. If they don't know the answer, they know they can come to me or maybe somebody else in the central office that might be able to help them. So I made it very clear that there is definitely a process of communication that will get you where you need to go with information. So yeah, I feel like they know that we have a pretty open ability here to talk as, staff and administration about concerns and needs and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Well, as we kind of close out our conversation, I always like to ask people, there's a number of folks that as this is their first time sitting this year in the superintendency. And then there's a number of folks that are aspiring superintendents. And so I always like to close out with, those folks that are in, their first year and those that are aspiring, what would, from your experience, because you've led multiple districts, you've been in administration for a while, what advice would you give somebody that is in that position?
Yeah. First of all, I would say make sure you're going into the superintendency for the right reason. I think there are some people, and administration in general, go into it for the right reason. Unfortunately nowadays, sometimes those the pay scale for teachers gets frozen, and you're going years without a raise, and people are like, well, I'll go into administration and I'll get a raise. If you're going into administration to make more money, you're going to earn it. I'll tell you that. First of all, you're going to earn it. So just realize that administration means, you're going to be in charge of some things and you're expected to have some answers and to help with some things that aren't always real fun and easy.
Yeah.
So just make sure you're going into it for the right reason. I mean, me personally, I went into administration because I said, I always enjoyed leadership. It didn't intimidate me. I liked being the guy who was depended on for certain things. And I felt it was a way for me to give back and serve. The way I was served as a student and as a teacher and that sort of thing. So number one, go into it for the right reason. Number two, there's a few realizations I think you need to understand. Number one, and I think you'd hear a lot of superintendents say this, the superintendency is a lonely job.
Yeah.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I'll say that because you're at the top of an organizational chart. So you're not going to build certain relationships like you would as a teacher. You're probably not going to be a really good friend with another person you're working with because you're at the top of that chart. So you have to find your connections in another way. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be friendly to people, and you have to be, and that sort of thing. But you're not going to find that same connection that you would as a teacher or a staff member. So the connections you're going to find are probably with other superintendents and things like that. And you have to build those connections. Like there are a handful of superintendents that I will pick up the phone and ask them questions like, hey, how would you handle this? How would you deal with this situation? Or just to call up and just vent.
Mm-hmm.
You have to become part of, I would say, always become part of a superintendent study council. I belong to two because that's how much I believe in them. And we sit around monthly. We have a monthly meeting and we talk about the newest legislation coming out or different things that are affecting us and that sort of thing, and just bounce ideas off of each other. So definitely find that group of superintendents that you feel comfortable learning from. And the other thing I would say is you have to find a way to relieve stress. Whatever works for you, whether it's exercise, faith, your church, fishing, you name it. I do several of those things I just mentioned. So that's some of the biggest things that I would say I would give people advice on is going into it for the right reason, finding people you can count on to help you learn more, relieving stress. Those are probably my top answers for you there on advice for either people just starting or wanting to get started.
Yeah, I think it's huge, right? Because it is the role is isolating, and if you don't have that support system of peers, it's even more isolating. So those connections become so pivotal to when you're leading these districts, especially when you face criticism, challenges, or even just unique things that need to kind of be overcome.
Yeah,
So I think it's fantastic advice. Well, Trent, thanks again so much for sitting down and just sharing with me some of the things about your specific journey and sharing some of the work that you're doing in the district. And hopefully we'll be able to maybe circle around and have another conversation at another point in time.
absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks, Trent.